Hello and welcome back to Spoken For. This week, my co-host and I spoke to Andrew Morgan, the commercial director of E1 Brew Co. But be sure to go back and listen to our last episode where we spoke to Vicky Cockman, the workplace lead at Mental Health First Aid England. The 5th of August is International Beer Day, a global celebration of beer which will take place across pubs, breweries and backyards all over the world. It's a day for beer lovers everywhere to raise a toast for breweries and bartenders and give some love for our beloved pint. The official site for International Beer Day is urging everyone to unite around the world under the banner of beer by celebrating all beers of all nations together on one single day. It was actor Paul Newman who reportedly said once, 24 hours in a day, 24 beers in a case. Coincidence? I think not. Whether he was joking or not, it is true that beer is one of the world's most celebrated and loved beverages, with new takes happening all the time with creations from global and microbreweries all over the globe. Beer has also spurred some of the most incredible ad campaigns. You only have to think of Guinness, or probably the best strapline in the world, from Carlsberg. So, to celebrate these marvellous beverages and hear a little bit more of what goes into the process of award-winning beers, we caught up with Andrew, the commercial director of E1 Brew Co. Shoreditch born and bred down the road from Ford's London offices, E1 is grounded in the culture of Shoreditch, Whitechapel and Spitalfields, areas which really embody modern London by being inclusive, diverse and innovative. So, let's find out a little bit more of what they're up to at the moment.
So, Andrew, so great to see you. We've heard a lot about the origins of E1 Brew Co. What made East London the place that you wanted to settle in?
So the founder of the brewery owns a network of bars in Shoreditch, and he decided that it would be great to create a brewery that represented the spirit and culture of the area of London that he personally loves.
Right.
And so it kind of came out of that, really. It was a pretty natural fit, and me coming in, being a huge fan of the area, somewhere that I come to take my mum to Columbia Road, and my family to Spitalfields, and we just Brick Lane is Brick Lane. So the opportunity to really capitalise upon all of the assets that this area of London has and represent it in the work that we did just felt like it was a really sort of simple, easy. Yes, I'd like to do that, please.
So you mentioned a couple of assets, so Columbia Road, Brick Lane. What are your top three?
I mean, Spitalfields Market's fantastic. I think that's just one of the most, it's great for tourists, great for the food scene there is fantastic. So, go there hungry, and there's loads of free samples, usually. Brick Lane is still just incredible. I mean, it's almost a cliche to go for a curry on Brick Lane, right? But we've had so many people that I've known from America who've come over, and on their hit list is got to have a curry on Brick Lane. So I think that's definitely there. And then, I think I'm going to throw Columbia Road back in, because that's just such an amazing spectacle on a Sunday morning, and there's nothing else like it. I think to just have these earthy flower sellers selling amazing, like just bonkers stuff, really simple things, through to just like massive trees that you can take home, and watching the people struggle. I remember an American tourist taking a photograph of myself and my wife where I was carrying a Christmas tree and she had like the most outrageous amount of flowers, and it was like, I've got to take a photo, and we were like, yeah, okay, there you go, and it was just bonkers. Yes, I think it brings out the whole area just brings out the sense of extravagance in all of us a little bit. It's a place that you can just smile and have fun.
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you is, I mean, I am not a big beer lover, but then when I came, and I was very lucky enough to come and have a beer tasting session with you at E1 Brew Co, I did find one that I really liked. We'll go on to that later, which was a CBD lager. But I was just wondering, I mean, in medieval times, it was the women, the alewives they were called, who were in charge of producing beer, and it gave them their own financial independence. Is brewing really a male-dominated industry, or is it now quite evenly split?
I think it has traditionally, when one thinks of beer, one thinks of men. I think one thinks of beer guts. I think one thinks of, guys with massive paunches, and I think pints and, pubs were certainly somewhere that up until kind of the smoking ban, really, were largely male-dominated places. You'd go there to get away from your missus and sing a few pints. But I think the way the world is now with, kind of from gastropubs through to just really gender-neutral places where beer isn't just for blokes, and I think it's a very gender neutral product. Actually, I think it's not really aimed at men. Means that women are engaging with it a lot more. You mentioned the CBD, and actually we found that's a very the positioning of that, because I think CBD for a lot of women is to do with wellness.
Yeah.
So they're aware of the creams and the potions and lotions and things that make it feel like it's a holistically positive thing.
Yeah. A mindful drink.
Yeah, indeed. Whereas I think, when I came in a year ago, we were still battling the idea of, is it going to get me high? And it was very much a cannabis related sort of thing to do with smoking. So I think it's been fascinating this last year to see that there has been a real movement towards that beer being almost 50-50. Whereas I think some of our 440ml cans, they're a bit big. They kind of look great, kind of if you're holding them for a fella, but on a little lady in the nicest possible way, it's going to look giant sized, really, and that might put some women off. I think the carbonation as well. I think there's a sense that women don't like the idea of burping, really. Whereas for guys, it's a bit of a badge of honor if you can do a decent belch. But I think overall, the industry is probably still more male, but it's come a long way. And I was just talking to a lady this morning who's about this, actually, who's in the industry, and I think it has come on a long way, and there aren't the barriers, really. I mean, some of the work's quite physical, but again, I remember seeing down at the Colonel Brewery in Bermondsey, and they had I think they still do. They have basically every day someone does a different job. So you'll be brewing one day, you'll be bottling the next, and you'll be moving kegs around. And there's no sense at all that there's any sense of delineation between men and women that work there, and it works. So I think it's maybe there's some perceptions that still need to be challenged, but overall, I think the beer industry is doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I remember I worked with a chef for many years, and it was that kind of transformation from, professional cooking is a man's job, and loads of male chefs around, but then the movement started and more female chefs were coming in and sort of being lauded for what they were doing and everything. So, yeah. And
just on the chef point, what, in your opinion, is the three best things for brewing a perfect pint? What would you say? The ingredients, is it the way that you brew it? Is it different? Because someone told me the other day about something, I think maybe like a Carlsberg Silver or something, and it's all obviously marketing, but they say that they brew it in a higher altitude so it tastes better. Would that be real?
I think I wouldn't like to comment on Heineken Silver's marketing strategy,
yep.
But I think they're going on an angle to do with freshness and they've been careful with the language. So I'm not entirely sure that the beer is fresher. I in a previous role of mine, we imported beer from America and created a whole cold chain to keep the beer fresh. Freshness is very important for beer that's brewed with fresh ingredients, and you can pasteurize and filter to make the beer much more stable. So the majority of stuff that has a 12-month shelf life in the supermarkets will have all of the bacteria, all the microbes taken out. But if you've got something that's a bit cloudier, something that's not been filtered, that's it's a little chemical cocktail in a can waiting to go wrong, really. And you've got to keep those fellas subdued. So keeping them cold keeps all of the things that could go wrong under control, and it slows it down if nothing else. So I think that that you can brew with real. The amazing thing with beer is you can throw anything in, right? You can literally put any ingredient in as long as you boil it up. You take the liquid out, you put it into a tank with some yeast and ferment it, then it's a beer. That really is about as simple as it gets. The type of yeast you use, the amount of sugar that gets released, everything about it is all up to the brewer. Whereas if you take wine, as someone said to me, French peasants can make wine just by squashing the grapes and sticking it in a barrel. It will turn to wine. I think with beer, there's a huge amount of technical knowledge that's required. So if that's not there, then you won't necessarily hit what you intended. And I think the amazing thing with breweries that manage to continue to rebrew the same beer time and time again is the science behind doing that is unbelievably exacting, and they, for all of the challenges of the big beer companies, they manage to produce a consistent product time and time and time again worldwide. globally, and different brew kits, different things, different ingredients. The ingredients were the same, but they're going to be batch to batch. They're natural ingredients, right? So I think great hops. There's no doubt that hops can just be the most amazingly enticing part of a beer experience, from the aroma to the taste that immediately comes, and the back end taste of bitterness. Then the malt, it's a core part. So the dark beers have got more malt in them, and you're from a Guinness that's jet black, that purely comes from the dark malt, the roasting that's used in it. So I think there's a good ingredients, keeping it simple. I'm not a fan of too many of these weird and wonderful beers, to be honest.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you.
Start throwing coconut in and marjoram and whatever else.
I had a cinnamon swirl stout the other day, and I had to throw it away.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be really frowned upon, and there was banana bread beer from Charles Wells, and that was about the only one that was out there. And a few Belgian weird ones like coconut beer that came in like a coconut cup. That was kind of weird and wonderful. But I think keep it simple. And then you have nowhere to hide, and your ability to showcase what you can do just comes out. And I think, if I was the beer that I drink more than anything is Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which is brewed in America and brought over here refrigerated, and you can buy it direct from them, and it's just perfect, just everything you want from a kind of classic craft beer experience. But the supermarkets, it's not refrigerated. So that beer will start to change character over quite notably if it's not refrigerated over time. And
so it sounds like it's a relatively easy process, and yet it's very complex. So don't be too complex and put coconuts and sort of lychees in there. But so keep it quite simple, and yet you can go wrong so easily. And we were talking before about the fact that wine has this almost kind of legend around it, that it's a really unnavigable, difficult journey that you've got to go on, and you've got to train for years to be a sommelier. Why doesn't beer have that same kind of halo around it?
Yeah, wine's fascinating. I mean, essentially it comes from one ingredient, which is a grape. Might come from different types of grapes, but it's basically just, that's it. That's what you start with, and all the natural sugars in there, the yeast is in it. It is literally just... You don't need to do anything other than extract that juice, put it into a fermenter, and allow it to ferment, and you'll get wine. With beer, yes, we talked about the technical side of it. You've got to really know how long do you boil it for, what do you put it in there. Right. Just so many variables, and then there's over 150 beer styles that are they're really quite different from each other. So you're starting from a point where beer is like incredibly complicated in terms of what you start with, and then you could put it into barrels, or you could do other things with it. You could, I remember Brewdog back in the day, they did a beer called Sunk Punk, and they put a cask of Punk IPA into the North Atlantic, and wanted to see what happened if you put it in the sea, because you can. I mean, you're not going to do that necessarily with wine. I think they'd go bonkers if you did that. And also I think, with wine, there's conventionality. So you train to know what you know. So again, when you look at orange wines and you look at the wines that have mixed, some different fermentation, it really goes against the grain of their training for those sommeliers that know what they're doing. And that confuses them, which is always quite fun. I think with beer, it's kind of inherently confusing. And that's why I think people, who really want to be challenged by what beer can be, the boundaries are infinite.
Yeah.
It really is just down to the sheer creativity of the producers. So I think it's an irony that wine appears to be complicated and beer is very simple, but actually the reality is the exact opposite.
I'll go into kind of one of these cool shops and see loads of different beers from loads of different microbreweries, and potentially one could say people are overusing the term microbrewery. What does it take to start a microbrewery? What do you need to do?
It's kind of interesting. I mean, I think we talked before this, but I'll give the stat again that back in 2007 there were 3 breweries in London: Fuller's, Meantime, and Budweiser and Guinness brewed at Park Royal. In 2010, I did a film for the London Brewers Alliance, which was the first year they came together, and there were 13 officially, although some of those were way out of London. So it was a real stretch to say Windsor and Eton is actually a London brewery, but 13 was say for 2010, and now there's over 200. So the proliferation in 15 years has been incredible. I mean, the growth is just unprecedented. But the there's I won't get into too much detail, but basically the smaller you are, the less duty you pay. So the government came in with a brewer's duty relief. So these small brewers get away with paying less tax than the big brewers, which gives them a commercial advantage. The idea was to try and encourage the industry. It's worked really well.
Well, yeah,
but it also means that they there's a limit where they have to start paying more tax, and these brewers will stay within that limit and will never really grow up. I affectionately call them Pan Breweries. Because they're kind of eternally youthful and don't have to go through the growing pains of actually becoming a really, big brewer. So they're brewing for themselves, they're brewing for the local market, they're hopefully making money, and they can do what they want really. I think when you're on a local stage, it's you're not comparatively looking to be better than anybody else. You just need to be able to do what you can do really. And I think whereas we don't have that many beer like awards over here in America, at the Great American Beer Festival, they have categories for all the breweries in America can enter, and they get really good awards. In the UK, we have it for cask at the Great British Beer Festival, but it's not really, we're not looking for it. We're not award seeking over here, which means all these beers just kind of go in the mix. And I think there's a I think personally it's a bit buyer beware if you're going to go into a shop and see a bunch of really unknown beers, because they may never be brewed again. You may like them, you may not. And if you're looking at £5-6 a can, it's quite a risk really to do that. I think going back to my Sierra Nevada, it's been brewed for 30 years. It's one of the most classic craft beers out there, and they've nailed it. And I think for me, a Magic Rock beer or a brewery that's been around for a while, that one of their core beers, High Wire, is much more interesting than some fancy new thing that maybe I'll like or maybe I won't. It's kind of, especially at £6-7 a pint, it kind of becomes a lot more focused on, I really want this to be good, and that may not be from some unknown brewery with an unknown beer.
So I'm actually going to a festival on Sunday. Will we be seeing E1 at any festivals this summer?
We are at a variety of festivals. We're pouring at Dreamland in Margate all summer. Nice. So that's quite exciting. We are at 51st State and a few others that, we're quite fortunate that our cans work really well as festival beers. You get one of the, nice can of 4% lager, just works well to get a couple of those two hands, two beers. That's what we got two hands for. Kind of just means you don't have to go back to the bar too often. For us, the festivals are a great way to be able to get people to experience our beer.
And you were talking about Pan Breweries, and is there something to be said? Because you partner with Shepherd Neame, don't you? Which is Britain's oldest brewer.
That's correct.
Is there something to be said for dignity and impudence? So something very old and something very established and something very new and very exciting matching together.
Yeah, I think when the deal was done before I was working for E1, I think the simple fit is that you can only stretch a brand so far, right? So beer brands have often, or breweries can only you can only stretch that identity with being Britain's oldest brewers so much. So when E1 came in as a very Shoreditch-based urban lager brand, I think for them there was an opportunity to be able to work with E1 to reach areas they wouldn't normally do. I think for some of the festivals, the core Shepherd Neame product could work well. The beers could work really well, but you're not necessarily going to drink, Bishop's Finger or a pint of Spitfire at a festival. You might do it some of them, but I think some of the, especially the London ones, we found that there's been, when the producers of the festival have had the opportunity to choose what they want, E1 just sits quite nicely as a more urban brand. But authenticity is very important. So you could have Shepherd Neame's marketing team could just make it up if they wanted, but it wouldn't ring true. No. And I think that's where, because we're based on Rivington Street, because we have our origin story, and we're working so closely with the community here to really empower and fuel them, it just really works that when you look into our socials, you kind of go, wow, you guys are doing some amazing stuff. You're working with Jessica Albarn, that's Damon Albarn's sister, at a gallery launch. And yeah, we were there, Damon was there. It was nice. And it's kind of that, if we were some big corporate brand coming in and just trying to buy this, it would just feel really faux. So I think it's quite hard to know. We hope we're on the right side of it, and we keep on trying to. We're still only really a year into this. With COVID and everything, it's still a brand that really feels like it's got a long way to go. But overall, I think the direction and the opportunity is just really, really interesting.
And I actually, to say that I loved coming to see you at Rivington Street, because it took us some time to find it, actually. And one moment we did, I didn't know what to expect. And it was really, it was really real. Do you know what I mean? And we sat in a corner and, we tried all the different, the IPA and the Pilsner Lager. And we tried 3. Obviously, I've said that CBD was my favourite. How did, talk me through how those even came to be? Did you sit down and say, right, we want an IPA, we want a lager, we want a CBD, or did they just sort of meld together and organically sort of appear in front of you?
Yeah, so it predates my entry to the business, but I knew the guy who preceded me who came up with the 3 beers, and I think a 4% Pilsner is just an absolute easy win. It's just a really well-priced, good entry level, simply enjoyable beer, which should just work for kind of everybody. It's not pretentious. It's not trying to do more than it is. It's just better than I think most people would expect, but it's not going to win awards for being the most outrageously amazing beer. It's just absolutely solid. The IPA came in at 5% and was a mixture of British and American hops. So it's kind of quite a, it's got quite a malty backbone that's quite good for traditional cask drinkers. This is somebody who likes a traditional British beer, likes a little bit of malt with it. It will please them, but it's also got enough hops in there and a mixture of American and British. So the American hops generally are more have more flavour, more aroma. The English hops are more for bittering. So that was what they were originally designed for. And so you get a kind of combination of that it's refreshing, got a little more strength from 4 to 5%. And it's a good, it's got some hairs in its chest, but not too much. It's not going to compete with craft, the kind of craft sector of being really massively flavoursome. So again, it's repeatable. I think there's a brewer who said to me back in the day, his greatest, he's happiest when he sees someone order a beer, one of his beers from the bar is great, but when they go back and order the same beer again, he knows he's really nailed it. And I think that repeatability is a very underused part of the more the craft beer scene. I think you'll get your Peroni drink will only drink Peroni, but actually when it comes to craft, I've known people who've never had the same beer twice for a year, and that's part of their journey. But I think actually repeatability is really important. And then CBD was just something that the FSA, the Food Standards Authority, put a thing in place in February 2010. And if you were brewing with CBD or doing a CBD alcohol products before then, you could carry on. But they put a stop on anybody else coming through and putting anything new on the market, just to try and work out whether they were going to approve it or not approve it. And they're still in hiatus as to that decision. So we've been able to have CBD lager on the market for a couple of years. And the CBD comes from the cannabis plant. It's the non-psychoactive side. So THC is the stuff that makes you go a bit balmy. This is just the more wellness side, and the hop and the cannabis plant are actually very close cousins of each other. So when you extract the hop oil and you have the CBD oil, which is what we use to make the beer, they're actually really aligned. This is they're very happy with each other. So we found that there's a slight citrus note that comes with it, again, it's just whether it's perceived or whether it's actually real. That people kind of feel that they're not getting as hungover or as drunk from it. Yeah, it's not something we can say as a on the bottle and kind of lead with it. But anecdotally, I'm purely from a personal point of view and not from the brewery's point of view, it definitely seems to just make you feel a little brighter in the morning. I think because the CBD is almost like a little blanket for the alcohol. The alcohol is not good for anybody. We all know that. But the two together work really well, and people, just really warm to it. And again, it's very repeatable.
Can I just quickly ask, what is the difference between a Pilsner and a lager?
So lager is a category and Pilsner is a style. So Pilsner is a lager type beer. Right. Lager itself is a whole category. There's like, you could have, the Germans would have maybe 20, 30, 40 different types of lager, Dunkels, Weiss beers. And the lager itself comes from the type of yeast that's used. So the technical definition is that it's called top fermented. So the yeast rise to the top with the lager yeast and can be taken off. Bottom fermenting yeast go to the bottom. And that's what ale yeast is generally. So ales and lagers would be the two different types of yeast used. And lager is a category, Pilsner, a type of beer that usually has a certain type of hop character that's within the lager category.
I've never known that. I've always wondered, but I've never known that.
I think for most people, they say lager, they think Pilsner. But actually, again, in the complicated nature of beer, there is a lot of different types of beer that would fit under the lager Some amazing beers. I mean, lager is is the most interesting and undervalued category. And I think actually, again, looking at the trends, it's really coming forward for people who want something that's just reliable, dependable, but interesting. Really, just has that just enough interest.
And you mentioned before about, sort of fusing two disciplines together, and you talked about Jessica Alban and art. And I remember when I came to see you, you showed me some lovely cans with pieces of art. They've become artworks themselves. Tell us a bit more about the art partnerships, that you've been involved with. And
so we came up with this idea of creating art cans. So these basically are artists who are doing or exhibiting at a gallery. We get them to design a unique can design, which we then put onto the cans. They sign them, they number them, and we basically give them away to the first 20 or 30 people that are going to turn up, and they get this amazingly awesome collectible object that is from the artist that's on display. So the gallery gets to talk about it, the artist gets to talk about it, we get to talk about it, the people that get them talk about it, and it was just a way of being able to we're not creating content with new beers. If you're a normal brewery, you'll just do a new beer a month, and that'll be what you'll talk about. And for us as E1, we're not going to go beyond those 3 beers. So for us to create the content that defines us and to be able to get people to talk about E1 and to get it out there, we've aligned with, for example, the street artists and the artists in Shoreditch to give them a platform they wouldn't have otherwise. Anyone could put a sticker on a can, right? That's nothing magical there. But when it's our beer and it's got our logo there and it's just kind of with their artworks with it, it creates something that's just absolutely tangible and real, And again, when you take that sticker that's a 2-dimensional object and put it onto the can, it turns into this 3-dimensional work of art.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was really
interesting. And the artists get excited, and for them, a lot of their dreams have been to design a beer can. I think it's an album sleeve and a beer can. For most designers are like, I really want to do both. So they get excited, and we don't own the design, so the design stays with the artist. If there's any commercialization that happens with it afterwards, if we plan on doing a sort of a gallery exhibition at the end of the year that will take all the cans we've done so far, do a small range available for sale, and all that money will go back to the artist. So for us, it's not, we're not looking to commercialize it like maybe Beck's did back in the day, where they did a whole variety of bottles that went around the world with different designs. This really is about these small little activations, which, my kind of holy grail thing, if it happens, would be a Japanese tourist, coming to London, kind of reading that there's going to be a can launch of somebody and turning up to an artist they've never heard of in a gallery they've never been to, and we can get people in a way that's not just about the usual art crowd and the usual people, and it's that's kind of that sense of trying to reach beyond what the normal parameters would be. And I guess as a brewery, as a beer brand, that would just normally be beer drinkers, but actually, we can't compete with the budgets of the big beer companies. So why would we bother to try and outgun Beavertown? We can come at it from an angle that actually is trying to get art lovers to love our beer rather than beer drinkers. And because the beer is, again, so approachable, and nobody should be offended by any of the flavors that are in our beers. Whereas, again, when one looks at craft, it can often be trying too hard, really, and people can be going, oh God, yeah, it's just too much for me. I can't drink the whatever it was.
The cinnamon swirl.
There we go, the cinnamon swirl. It's like, just keep it simple. A good porter, even Guinness. It's just it's for a lot of people, it's too much. But it's just a great entry level beer that I think most of us. I think we drink for reward. I think there's a sense of people want to feel that glass of wine or that bottle of beer is it's like, so I've earned it. Yeah. And again, do I want to take a risk on that, or do I want to? I mean, that's why commercial lager is so popular, right? Because people know what they're getting. You can go anywhere in the world, and a Big Mac's a Big Mac, and a pint of Carling's a pint of Carling. It's we want to know that we're not going to be wrong-footed. And I think to some degree the craft beer world has, for a while, really did. It's still a dangerous game. You got to really be careful about whether you're going to like what you want. But there's some amazing beer out there. So it's not to be, not wanting to do it, but I think yeah, I think for most people, it's just go back to what you know is just it's so easy, right?
Yeah. And why do we drink pints? Why is it a pint? You wouldn't really drink a pint of orange juice.
So this is there is I can answer this question. So there's the government have weights and measures, which is part of the legally defined amount that has to be poured so that you're not going to be underserved. So that's why measures come in a certain measure and you can't deviate from that. A pint is 1 unit. So the sense is you can have a pint or half a pint. And those are if you're dispensing beer in a bar, you legally have to do that. And Brewdog actually back in the day petitioned to get this changed into thirds because
like the Aussies,
yes,
schooner
2/3. So we, when Brewdog were presenting the argument that they're making a beer at 14%, 18%, it's quite possible. You can put it in a barrel, you can barrel age it, you can easily get a beer up to 12, 14, 18%, wow. Which then we're looking at, both wine, fortified wine, kind of sherry territory. Yep. The idea that the only way that you can pour that is in half a pint is ridiculous, right? So they finally, got the government to concede that thirds are okay. So you can now have a third of a pint, which is appropriate. It's a large glass of wine.
There's 250 mils.
568 is a pint. So I'll let you get your calculator out to work out exactly what a third is. But it's, I think, again, there's such a stigma with beer that if one talks about like a 12% beer, you usually get an intake of breath and a kind of like, oh, gosh, that's really strong, isn't it? But no one's ever going to say that about a 12% red wine. Like, it's just normal, right? And when you get away from the pint mentality, again, the cliche back in the day was, oh, I couldn't do a pint of that. It's like, well, no, you're not supposed to do a pint of that. I mean, imagine saying that with wine. Imagine
having a pint of wine, please.
Oh man, I mean, the social stigma. Even now, right? And I kind of laugh about this. That you could be out and comfortably you're going to get through 2 bottles between 2 of you, right? Yeah. Easily going to happen. The idea that you'd order a bottle each and just pour your own bottle, you wouldn't do it, right? Socially, absolutely, it's anathema. You would be stigmatized, okay? So with beer, the idea of like, well, it has to come in a pint, and if it's not pintable, then it's not real beer. It's absolute nonsense. So that sort of 12 to 14% barrel aged stuff that now you can get poured as a third is just, it's a whole category that beer is. Yeah, I mean, it's got so much to offer, but commercially, it's a real challenge because that's going to be, again, in a pint, it'll probably be a £25 pint.
Do you think drinking thirds will ever be a thing?
Well, it's out there. I mean, if you go to the right bars, you'll get it. But I think it's a real challenge because I think the perception of beer is that it's a very simple product and it should be pintable, and that is 99% of what is served out there. That's why, I mean, it's a challenge commercially to brew anything that's not within that. I mean, the government, again, brought in legislation to tax beer that's over 7.4%. So they de-incentivized anybody from brewing anything above that because they'll have to pay a lot more duty. And that was a really, we've got a traditional love of things like barley wines. A barley wine is a really classic British type of beer that the barley's got lots of sugar, which means it turns into alcohol. So it's naturally going to hit between 8 and 10%. The fact is that due to that government legislation, no one can really brew that beer because it's taxed so highly that it's impossible to sell. So actually, culturally, we lost some of our association with higher strength beer, and I think that's to the detriment of the category overall. But I think look out for the thirds, look out for those bottles that are wine strength. Don't be scared of them. Just really treat them as not being pintable. Yeah. And actually, the journey you can go on with them is. It's really that is so much fun. I had the pleasure of running a business that imported beer from around the world for a few years. I had a bar in Bermondsey, and we specialised in that kind of stuff. And we brought over some of the most outrageously amazing beer that just changed lives. Really, someone with an old school camera member, some guy in his 50s with a bit of a gut, and there with a third of a pint in a beautiful stem glass, and he's paid £8 for it. And coming over to me and going, "This has changed my life. This is the most amazing thing I've ever had." And you kind of go, "Oh, I'm pleased." We managed to provide that, but you're not going to necessarily get that in a supermarket. You're not going to get that in a Wetherspoons. You're not going to get that in a place where you're going to expect the unexpected. And I think with beer, again, there are a few bars in around the country that you can still get that experience. But there's a lot of social stigma that still we have to overcome when it comes to people's relationship with beer.
And you must have seen the landscape really change, you know, and I'm wondering if you've seen, I mean, we are massive contradictions as people, you know, but definitely the younger generation. I was talking to an event promoter the other day, and he was saying back in the day, you know, you'd party on a Friday, party on a Saturday, and you can move on a Sunday. Whereas now, the younger generation want to do all-day events when they perhaps yoga before brunch, and then they sort of go on to the evening, but things can finish earlier. How has that affected the way, or has that sort of influenced the way that E1 Brewco has come out with products?
I think so. The 3 beers are all eminently sessionable. I think, you know, one can, again, they're repeatable. So I think that's a move towards the idea that these are not, you know, they're kind of lunchtime beers. You could have one of them and it's not going to knock you over. I think the reality is that the availability of alternative products is unbelievably different than it was 10 years ago. You know, I can now reward myself with a kombucha, or I can actually have an alcohol-free beer that's actually tasty. You know, it may not rise to the greatest levels of reward that wine and beer can offer, but I think that sense that, you know, you need to go on a bender and it's going to be like you're going to have that Sunday off. I think actually with social media, you know, the ability for someone to take a photograph of you looking a bit off your face is there.
Good point. Yeah.
Whereas it wasn't there back in the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, what happened that evening, you wouldn't know. So I think there's a real sense of self-control that maybe, you know, might be slightly pious, but actually it's not a bad place to be, right? I mean, if we've got younger people making better choices that are going to give them retain control over themselves, and nobody wants to see a drunk person going down the street at night. It's horrible. You know, you kind of think, oh my God, how are you going to get home? So I think that is a, you know, I think as someone said to me, you know, they don't want to be like their parents. They don't want to, you know, they don't want to be opening the wine at sort of 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon and going through the whole thing. It's kind of, that's not like, you know, being drunk is not the goal, right? And actually sociability doesn't rely upon alcohol in the same way, I think. So I think it's an interesting place. I think that there's more choice. There's still a great place of beer. Personally, I have a couple of nights a week where I'll be on the alcohol free, and it just feels like I've, you know, and then there'll be a couple of nights where I won't. And having that option has been amazing to be able to choose to moderate my units over the week, but not feel like I'm being austere. So yeah, I think, you know, from our point of view at E1, we obviously encourage responsible drinking, but I think it goes without saying that I think culturally people have, you know, the world has changed really. More consumption at home, less in the bars, you know, massive shift to that during COVID, getting back to normal to some degree, but still a challenge in London. I mean, you know, being here and seeing Mondays and Fridays where it's at 30%, and kind of when Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays where it's 60-70% of what it was. You know, I think it's a real challenge for bars, but then they've got to try harder. You know, you've got to find other reasons to get people in.
And talking about back to normal and drinking more at home, 2 questions I want to ask you. One of them was, I know you have got partnerships with lots of F&B outlets. What are a couple of, you know, if I was going for lunch or dinner, where could we pick up, you know, one of the ones?
So we're in Burger and Lobster. That's a real win for us. We've been in there for a while. TGI Fridays, we're in there as well. In terms of online, Master of Malt, who are a really good spirits business, they sell our beer. Ocado, you can buy E1 from Ocado.
Oh, okay.
Which is cool. Yeah. And yes, it's a challenge. I mean, what we're doing at the moment is to, you know, really trying to carve out the opportunity for people to buy our beer, but without a supermarket listing, it becomes quite piecemeal. You know, you've got to list all the individual venues that are there. And that's our real goal at the moment is to you know, to try and use all the stuff we're doing in the community to just give people a chance to feel like they're drinking, you know, a taste of this part of London. I think it's fascinating that if you took, you know, kind of Asahi from Japan, and you took Peroni from Italy, and you took Heineken from Holland and Carlsberg from Denmark, lined them all up, you know, people when they pick up that branded bottle or that glass, you know, there's an association with the country that it's produced in. The majority of them, or some of them, you know, brewed in the UK. It doesn't really matter. It's just this feeling that that's what, you know, the brand is, and that's where that's the ideology that underpins it. And I think for us, you know, we want that to be Shoreditch and E1. We want people to be in Manchester or Thailand with a can, look through our Instagram feed and kind of go, oh my God, this is what I'm buying into, and it's I think in reality, the idea that the beer needs to be produced exactly where it comes from, again, it's just isn't really what it was. I think that there's a, you can look at it with someone like Fuller's, and they've got the water that they use, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that defines it in terms of what their terroir is for it. But largely, I think most consumers are really unaware, and they just want to have a feeling that they've attached themselves to somewhere. I think it's place based. I really do. I think those global super brands, they've all got a country behind them. But do people really think they're drinking San Miguel and are in Spain? Well, it's interesting.
That's something I've always wanted to ask, actually, is what marketing trick? There must be marketing tricks used when something is coming onto the market to make it really popular. I cannot remember what the beer was, but somebody told me a long time ago that, at one point you passed any pub and there were loads of empties of one brand, and people started to pick up and think, well, this is really popular, I must buy one. Are there any sort of marketing tricks that are used?
I have heard, and I don't think it was beer actually, but I think it was a soft drinks brand who did have an activation team who went and put empty cans in bins. That definitely happened.
Wasn't it Red Bull?
Well, if you want to say Red Bull, I'll agree with you.
What about Foster's as well?
I don't know. Foster's is fascinating because what you don't do is you don't talk about the product. So for me, Foster's is always comedy on four. Like I think of that partnership they had there, and it's got nothing to do with the product. And in general, with those beers, you're not going to talk about the product. Like that's the last thing you're going to do because you're just going to. There's nothing to say. It's nice, it's cold, it's refreshing. That's it. But they're all the same, right? So you've got to find all of those marketing hooks and angles that are going to help the consumer have an identity to what is a golden fizzy liquid in a glass. I remember being in Canary Wharf with a bunch of people when I used to work there, and it got to the end of the night, and this bar that normally would have branded glasses, for all the beers. I got around in, and there was like an Asahi and a Peroni and Foster's and whatever it was, and they all came in generic pint glasses. And I brought it back to the table, and they looked at me and said, "Well, which one's which?" And I said, "I don't know." So we had a little kind of, drink and pass it round, and no one could tell which one was theirs.
Really?
And I thought that was a really interesting kind of thing. When you take the glass away and you take the association, is there really much difference to a 4% to 5% fizzy Pilsner? Probably not, but that thing is, the reinvention of Stella Artois with that chalice glass was an absolute stroke of genius. We've been consulting with a guy who did that actually with E1, and he's been fascinating to kind of talk to him about that sense of how do you position something in a way that that gives meaning to the consumer, and I think beer it's a closely differentiated product. Like there's not a lot to say in the Pilsner market that's really going to make a difference. So it's everything that's not in the glass, everything that's that is marketing or positioning or brand or for what we're doing again in terms of trying to align ourselves with the area of London that we grew up in, really.
What's next? What's your next?
For E1?
Yeah.
I think that the work we've done with the artists has been fantastic. So I think we're going to carry on doing that. I think we're never going to, well, never say never, but we're not going to magically get millions of pounds to produce what we're doing. I think the work that we've done so far has got momentum, and we want to be in supermarkets. That's a real aim for us at the end of the year. And just want to give people.
Which one would you go for first?
I don't know. I think they've all got different identity. I don't think there's anyone that I wouldn't want to go in. So I think that would be probably the right way to answer that question, rather than alienate any of them at this point. If you're listening, Tesco's or Morrison's or Waitrose. But I think that the sense that there's a lot of unfinished business. I think we've got to really, being a postcode brewery, I think it's really interesting. And I've always loved Brooklyn Brewery for the fact that it makes me feel like I'm drinking something from Brooklyn. I've been to Brooklyn. It's not brewed in Brooklyn. It's brewed upstate in New York, but it doesn't matter. I've been to the brewery. I love the area, and it makes me smile a little bit whenever I drink it. So I think I want to do that with E1. We want to broaden our reach, give people an opportunity to see, our socials. We represent the street art every week. We go around and update what's happening, in terms of who's got new artwork here, there, and everywhere. And I think we just want to be a kind of beacon for for the area, and then the beer naturally comes with it, really, to kind of go, oh yeah, okay, I why wouldn't I want to drink E1? I kind of love the area, and this is you know, this is where it comes from.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If anybody wants to find out more,
Website's the best place to go. e1brew.co.uk. That's got all of our socials, our web store on there. And best place to buy the beer really is via the website, or Master of Malt. Again, they've done really, they're selling more than we are, actually, which is really nice in its own way. It's a really good, successful partnership with them. But e1brew.co.uk, we'll have our socials, and just any comments, always gratefully received. There's a nice comment section there, so please write in with anything that you thought about it. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, great, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Cheers.